Hello and welcome to another modelling video. This is Alan from the Man at YouTube with another airbrush review. Unboxing and looking at the Neoeco T-217B model trigger double action gravity feed airbrush. Chinese manufactured, purchase off AliExpress at around $50. Pretty high end and immediately out of the box very high quality and nicely polished. With an all steel body encased in a nice cardboard box and foam insert. Large threaded gravity reservoir with friction precision fit lid. Spare standard Hseng needle nozzle, 0.5mm built in, 0.3mm extra. 4 crown nozzle caps with notches and perfect circles, very large. We will get back to that. Standard nozzle wrench, and underneath the foam insert full instructions. Well printed, modern layout, fully comprehensive in really easy to understand basic English in an instructional manner like it's native written. With all the information you expect with specs, box content, schematic parts breakdown and list, and isometric assembly guide. All very helpful. The other side is probably one of the best introductions to airbrushing, with guide on operating the controls, cleanup instructions, troubleshooting and what to do, and a very impressive and new to me pictogram of how viscous your paint should be using a stirrer and how it drips off. I do need to try this out. Immediately noticed in my hand it is incredibly heavy and sound structurally strong build, which I really like and enjoy in an airbrush over the plastic and thin aluminium ones, which work very well, but there's a weird psychology in weight in a tool feels like it's better and higher quality where performance is pretty much the same. The breakdown is very similar to the Gallier pistol grip airbrush. I've experienced a couple now, and besides the extra components that make up the trigger and the elongated air valve, it's nothing different to a Hseng and other builds of airbrushes. With any new airbrush, especially if you're new to the craft, it's very important to dismantle and be mechanically sound and familiar with your airbrush, putting it back together so it functions mechanically the same, run air through it and knows that it's working. The connection to the air valve is a bit new for me, very tight. There's 2 nuts, we'll get back to it. Incredibly tight, and a wrench is required to loosen it up. Take note on the spacing of the 2 nuts. Observation from the breakdown, everything is just big and thick, hard to lose. Again, I really like this. Long threads, good fit. For smooth operation, we'll be lubricating the mechanisms with petroleum jelly and a Q-tip. Areas very lightly glazed include the rear end of the main body of the brush, thumb thread all the way to the back of the packing O-ring bolt. Tiny amount on the air valve in case of paint leakage. And most important, a very generous amount on the trigger assembly, starting with the needle guide rod and the internals of the sleeve that goes over that. Besides the mechanisms being more fluid, another helpful part is if paint leaks past the needle O-ring, it will mix with the lube and not seize anything. Instructional assembly. Starting with the trigger assembly, slide the spring over the needle guide rod, putting the sheath over that, making sure it's free to float. This slots in, and with correct adjustments will interlock with the spacer connected to the trigger. Correct assembly will make it go backwards and forwards. Needle cover sandwiches right on, then tightens into place with a specialty nut, keeping an airtight seal with no O-ring, absolutely insane. Slide the needle in, taking care not to snag or jam on anything. It's very smooth and seats easily. Tightening the needle nut on, which will pinch it to the assembly and move backwards and forwards by operating the trigger. Threading on the rear cover next. If it doesn't fit, open the needle stopper all the way back. Lastly, screwing on the air valve, making sure there's a small gap between the 2 nuts, which I failed to do. Pistol grip slides on, and a nut threaded it on to keep it all in place. Again, the cup has a nice friction fit. with important air ventilation and threads right on top, concluding the correct assembly. Quick, stress-free, no point. I had a fear of causing damage due to delicate precision threads or components, excluding the needle and nozzle. The air input is a standard 1/8 inch thread and can connect to most modern hobby size oilless compressors. I'm using a Hseng patten compressor. At first, air was constantly flowing as I tightened the two nuts on the air valve side by side, triggering it open. Dismantling, I figured this out and created the maximum amount of space, which would then not operate at all. On the third random blind fitting, it actually nestled quite nicely and started operating as intended by operating the trigger. It was a very quick and easy adjustment to make. I proceeded to prepare some mediocre grade lacquer hobby paint, thinned to a watery viscosity, which flowed and atomized beautifully and buttery smooth even for a Hseng end. The first test is the old spoon, and it would dust on without any sign of speckling and orange peel. Again, very smooth. Great coverage, very ideal for base coating, priming, gloss coats. However, it came out very heavy, fast and thick to other smaller Hseng airbrushes. Doing the line tests, first is the fan nozzle tip that has the two prongs, bayonet pieces extruding out, which had a large spray pattern and produced a lot of overspray-esque gradient fade. Again, not speckly or spluttery. Very intense and smooth spray pattern with a lot of volume of paint moving immediately. Not much in the way of control or fine lines. Very, very thick outlet. It's very clear it's far more of a feature rather than a flaw. Before finishing that thought, I removed the nozzle crown nut and gently slid it off. It's very nice and pleasant to see that there was no buildup of paint around the outlet hole, crown or inside that would clog with prolonged use. Something that's very common with most Hseng e-water airbrushes, especially after wear and tear on the needle and nozzle. The next and final nozzle was a standard crown cone that encompassed the entire needle nozzle, but like 4 to 5 times bigger. This pattern was even more intense, slight finer line, a lot more control, but still a lot of volume and coverage of paint from your usual airbrush size. The gradient and overspray was minimalized to a very tight, sharp line. This would be absolutely excellent for wet coat and base coat or a reasonable amount of control painting masked surfaces. And most likely the needle nozzle size and cap I will use. To clean up, first we reclaim the paint. Wipe out the cup paint reservoir. Being very large, it's appreciative to my fairly fat fingers. Doing all this with a solvent soaked tissue. Pouring approximately 2 ml of gun cleaner into the reservoir, I put my finger up against the nozzle end and bubble clean the internals. Spraying it all out to clear and empty the airbrush of soiled liquids. It's incredibly quick to clean out with its quick flow of paint, and found the second pass had no contaminants. As advised in the instructions, first, only the fine cap can be jet bubbled. Secondly, I removed the rear cover and the needle to wipe it down clean and stuck it back in with care. Tightening up the rear cover, concluding the cleaning of this airbrush, which a turnaround of colour was under a minute. The process feeling comfortable and natural. With final thoughts, my view is starting to change on pistol grip trigger airbrushes, and am enjoying it for general base coating, priming and top coats, and is likely to add it to my usual repertoire. Being only the fourth one I've used, it's been the best and I'm absolutely in love with it, and will keep using it unless something better comes along. It's a perfect combination of a high-end branded airbrush at about a third to fifth of the price, because I've never heard of this brand before. It feels natural and comfortable to use, almost like an old friend or favourite tool, which has only occurred with a few and special airbrushes. Never anything that would paint large volumes and surfaces quickly, which I've been in the market for a very long time, and that feels that immediate niche for me. The results, test spoon and test patterns all pretty much speak for themselves. I always feel that the Hseng Iwata pattern of airbrush is just a shotgun approach for all mediums, general purpose uses, from inks and fine paperwork to spraying the thickest of paints onto models and surfaces. But nothing really feels specialized to primer, microfilling paints and thicker paints until you start playing with needles and nozzles and going to a 0.5 opening, resulting in atomization, beginner issues and clogging or flow, especially when speed and large surfaces are a factor. But big industrial spray guns used for things like cars and painting entire houses are just far overkill and expels more paint than a rattle can. This is designed for a purpose and it does it very well. At the moment I can highly recommend it, but there's another 2-3 nozzle assemblies I have seen from range of trigger airbrushes, and also wish to test those out before I have a final conclusion. But this one, or any generic one that has a very chunky nozzle cover, is a safe bet. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, until next time, stay tuned for further content. We'll catch you guys next time, and see you later.